Thank you for coming. We're thrilled to see a large group of people here interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and learning some concrete steps that you can take to advance DEI in your schools and your communities. I'm Rebecca Bauer. I'm Family Engagement Manager at National PTA. I'm here with my colleague, Griso Barrios, Family Engagement. Sorry about that. We are going to be talking tonight about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm going to run through the agenda with you before we get started. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the Center for Family Engagement, where the department that both Griso and I are part of. We're going to chat with you a little bit about National PTA's diversity, equity, and inclusion work so far. Then we're going to introduce our brand new tools. I think what a lot of you came here for. We also have 3 fantastic local leaders here who have already piloted these tools and can tell you about their experiences. We're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. And at the end, if we have time, I'm going to share some bonus resources with you. And if not, we'll send those in a follow-up email. So what is transformative family engagement? The Center for Family Engagement was established just about 4 years ago. So while PTA itself is really old, the Center for Family Engagement isn't. And we were created in order to transform and change the way people see family engagement, to really advance programs, practices, and policies that advance our mission to make every child's potential a reality. I'll go into a little bit more about what that actually looks like in action in just a moment. But the ways that we do this are by building knowledge and awareness. And that's through a lot of different resources, the tools we're going to share tonight, the webinar you're on, our blog articles. We also catalyze PTA leaders. This is primarily through our grants to the field. The leaders you will hear from tonight received grants. This allowed us really to have the opportunity to work with them, coach them, and learn from them. And then lastly, we also contribute to the National Parent Voice Agenda. We sit on coalitions, committees, really to make sure that families have a seat at the table where education-related decisions are being made. So the 4 I's of family engagement are really the how behind that idea of transformative family engagement. And the first one that we're going to be talking about most often tonight is inclusive. When you're inclusive, you're questioning your assumptions, you're intentionally building relationships, and you're inviting diverse perspectives to the table. The next one's individualized. We often say that the first time people come to the PTA, it's because they want to get something out of it for their own kid. So we need to be responsive to their needs. We need to offer them tailored experiences, and we need to reach out in personalized ways to really make sure that we are offering something unique to each individual family. Next, we have integrated. This has to do with putting the T in PTA, really connecting with teachers, aligning programming and initiatives to the school system as a whole, and going beyond one-time events. Lastly, we talk about impact, and this has a lot to do with measuring success, but when we say measuring success, we don't just mean how many people attend an event. We also mean, what did those people learn? Did they have the opportunity to practice and interact and develop new skills? So as we talk tonight, we just wanted to give you this foundation because you'll hear during the panel, you'll hear when Griso's talking about some of our new tools, ways that you can be inclusive, individualized, integrated, and impactful in your approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So on to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is when families are represented and respected. So if you think about a PTA meeting, diversity means the people in that meeting, the people sitting on that board, they look like and are like your general population. You have different religions represented, different genders, different socioeconomic classes. Inclusion takes things a step further. It means that people who are reflective of the population, not only are they in the room, but they are safe, welcomed, and they feel like they belong, which makes them ready and eager to contribute and really truly engage. Lastly, we have equity, which is providing fairness in resources, opportunities, and outcomes so that everyone gets what they need to be successful. When you're talking about equity, you're really thinking at a systems level. So we're going to go into that a little bit further. and think about your own DEI journey at PTA. So we think about this as a continuum. When PTAs, are at the earliest stage, they may be color or identity blind. You may have heard someone say, well, I don't see color. And what that really means is that they're not having these conversations and they would rather focus on similarities than acknowledge differences. They're not lifting up these issues in any routine or regular way. If you're a little bit further along, you're at the diversity stage where you have noticed that the people at your meetings, the people on your board, the people at your events don't look like your community, and you're trying to get them there. You're trying to invite them and get them to attend. Next is inclusion. If you're past the diversity stage and you've got representation in the room, but you feel like maybe they don't feel safe or welcomed, or really like they are should feel just as empowered to take a leadership role, then you're at the inclusion stage, and you might be thinking about different ways you can change your programming to make it resonate more with certain audiences and subsets of the population. And then lastly, there's equity. And when you're thinking about equity, you're taking a systems level approach, and you're really coming at every single aspect of school life with DEI in mind. In the same way that systemic racism affects many, many facets of our society, we need to think about equity as it affects so many facets of school life, beyond just PTA events, but even, advocacy around school discipline issues, advocacy around like who has access to AP classes, all of that plays in. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm going to ask you what stage you think your PTA is at. So feel free to enter now. Do you think you're at the color identity blind, diversity, inclusion, or equity phase? And I'm going to give it just a second. Thanks to everyone who's answering. It's fun to see the numbers jumping back and forth. We have a lot of people who are in the emerging diversity stage. A solid group in the color identity blind stage. Very few in equity and some in inclusion. Seems like it's mostly stop jumping around. I'm glad to see that we have so many at the diversity stage, and that's because I think that's where a lot of our grantees were at when they started. Our panelists can weigh in on that a bit later. But the truth is our grantees were all at different stages. So wherever you are, there's something to learn. The real goal of our grant that we worked on was to move people from one part of the spectrum to another. And it's not, clear cut. You could sort of be in between two, but we wanted to move people forward to whatever enhancing DEI looked like for them. And that's what we want to help you do with these new tools. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass things over to Griso, who is going to tell you a little bit more.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. So this past spring, we've been lucky to work with 14 local PTAs from 11 different states on this diversity, equity, and inclusion grant. So this group of grantees was widely diverse and included 10 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools. 9 of the PTAs were from schools that were considered high poverty schools, and 3 of our PTAs were from rural schools. So in addition to all of that, all of these PTAs were demographically diverse themselves in their own ways. They kind of represented different communities, had different populations, obviously, and they were all at different stages of their own DEI journey. I think in terms of thinking about the DEI journey, you're often like, maybe you're doing pretty well in one area and you're kind of inching into the equity or the inclusive side. And in other areas, you could do a little bit better work. So I think they can attest to the fact that they were kind of all over, and it's really neat to be able to showcase them, because given that they were on different parts of their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, these tools help them advance their own DEI work. So just comes to show that wherever you are, these tools could be tremendously helpful and valuable to you and your PTA. So now I'm going to dive into these resources with you and share a bit about how you can use them to advance your own DEI work. It's important to keep in mind that I'll be sharing these in the same order they were intended to be used. So first, I'll start off with the diversity profile. which is our first step and what our grantees used as their first step to inform their work. This tool is intended to help you really sit with your demographics and ask yourself, who are the families in our community? So keep in mind that if you're not sure, I know a lot of people ask, where do we get this information about our school? Where could we find out demographics? We always tell folks to check in with your administration, or you could also check the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES, for more information, but check with your administration, with your principal first. Those would be the most accurate bits of information. So I'll jump back into the diversity profile, and you'll notice that in this piece of it, there's space to input your own demographics related to race, socioeconomic status, and then physical and learning differences. And then as you move on through the diversity profile, there are sections for you to select who's in your community by religion, family structure, LGBTQ community, age ranges, gender, and geography. So keep in mind that some of these might not have a specific number tied to it where you could sit with the number, but it might require you to really reflect based on your own observations, what you know, and who you're building relationships with. So just because there's not a number there, we really want you to sit with who you know from your community and what you know about your community. And then this next section on the slide is, the last bit of the resource is the reflection piece, where you'll ask yourself, all right, so based on what we know about our demographic makeup, who's missing? What are the gaps in the engagement and representation within our PTA? And then what are some of the barriers that might be contributing to these gaps? So that's your piece of, after you go through and really reflect on your demographics and sit with your numbers, ask yourself, who's here and who are we missing? All right, so now that we've got the glance of this first resource, I'm sure your gears are already kind of turning. So we'd love to hear what some of you are thinking. So in the chat, if you're comfortable sharing, let us know who's in your community, who participates in your PTA, and then who leads the PTA. And if you can think of maybe, if you can identify some of those gaps as well, just based on the top of your head, you feel free to share those too. I'll pause here and give us a few seconds to share. All right, you guys can feel free to continue sharing. I'm gonna keep sharing in the chat as you think of things. I'm gonna move into the next resource, which is our listening sessions and facilitators guide. Our grantees use this guide to plan out the listening sessions with their community and to facilitate the session itself. As you see on the screen, the guide is broken down into the before, the during, and the after of your listening session. So in your before, you'll be prompted to consider, how are you going to recruit for the listening session? How will you host them? And how are you planning to follow up with your participant? And then for the during, you'll notice that it reminds you to be aware of your assumptions while conducting listening sessions, and remember to create and maintain a judgment-free zone. I see a lot of chats coming in, so I'll give more time in the next one. And then we'll head into the discussion questions, which will really get into understanding your parents' experience and how they chose to engage with their child's education, and what they know about the PTA and what their experience has been like with the PTA. So you'll see that reflected in these questions. The questions are really meant to help guide the conversation, to obtain some meaningful feedback and help you stay in that listening mode. We like to emphasize that a lot, that throughout the listening sessions, we wanted our grantees to stay in listening mode. I think it's really common and easy for us to want to explain, this is what PTA is, and really try to interject. But the most meaningful feedback really came from sitting back and listening, getting to know families and giving them a space to share about their experience and share about themselves and their priorities for their child and their child's education. All right, so now after seeing that resource, I want you to reflect on a time when you felt truly listened to and think about what that felt like. What did it feel like? What did it look like? What did that group or person do to really make you feel like you were being listened to and heard? And then in the chat, if you would like and are able, please share what are some things that your PTA has done or could do to create opportunities for active listening and relationship building. So I'll pause here for a while so folks can kind of share in the chat. I see a lot of you had, some of you had some specific demographic numbers, which is awesome. Community builders are not centered on fundraising. I see awesome things coming in. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, everyone. We'll save the chats too and send that in the follow-up email. I think you all have really awesome tips and information in there. All right. Thanks so much for sharing. And feel free to keep on sharing as I move into the third and final resource, which is our action plan. The action plan is designed to help you reflect what you heard from families and to outline your next steps. So you'll see that you can input the main takeaways from your session up on top and use those to build out your goals. So for each goal, you'll identify a potential partner, the amount of effort or lift that goal is going to take. And then you're going to identify which finding or feedback that goal ties back into based on what you heard. And then the next bit of the action plan will help you outline the how you'll be achieving your goal and then who is going to take the lead on that goal, who's going to do what. This is a really awesome tool to keep your team driven and hold yourselves accountable as leaders to accomplish your important DEI goals, which sometimes feel really lofty. This is a really great way to really outline those. You'll notice that some of them in terms of lifts, some of them might be something that you work on all year. And then some of them might take you a couple months or a month or something like it could be a quick shift that you could do. And then our final advice for taking what you hear to make a change is to set short-term and long-term goals. Start with those easy wins. Like I said, if there's something that you could do within the first month or two, that's a good, easy win and it's still progress and still working towards your ultimate goal to be more equitable. And then keep listening and checking in with your community. We want you to make sure, after you do a listening session, make sure you circle back with that community and those parents that you talk to and ask them, this is our action plan. This is what we're doing. Does this kind of, reflect what you were thinking and what your needs are? And if not, work with them and continue checking back with them because your ultimate goal here is really to build relationship with other families and other communities within your own school community, because that's ultimately what's going to make your PTA more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable. All right, so those were our resources, and don't worry, we're going to send those out via email afterwards, and the link will be in the chat also. So now that I've shown you what these resources look like, we are going to hear from some of our awesome grantees to learn about how they use the resources within their own community and what their journey has been like. So joining us today is going to be Dr. Nicole Willis, who is a mom of an 8-year-old daughter who just completed 2nd grade this week. Woohoo to her. Nicole is also a PTA leader at Ridge Creek Elementary School in Humble, Texas. She's currently an associate professor and interim chair of the social work department at Texas Southern University, where she has taught for the last 10 years. Next, we have Rebecca Frazier. Rebecca is a board member of the James Allen Elementary PTA in Lexington, Kentucky. She's a mom of 2 children, ages 4 and 6. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Faye Serafika, who is a mom of 2 boys, a first grader and a preschooler, and joining the Horseman PTA Sleepy Hollow in New York. And she joined her PTA last fall, Horseman PTA in Sleepy Hollow. She is a co-lead of the PTA's DEI committee and will join the board in the upcoming school year as the new secretary. So welcome, ladies, and thanks so much for being here. I know you have so many things going on, but I know our leaders and parents are eager to hear about your journey and what you've learned. So I'll get us started. Just asking you to each do a brief introduction and share why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to you and why it's important to your PTA. Nicole, can you kick us off?
Sure, I can. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Ms. Barrios, for that introduction. And again, my name is Nicole. I live in Humble, Texas. And, you know, being a woman of color myself, diversity, equity, and inclusion is always something that I have been affected by and pay attention to ever since I was a little girl, right? And so, you know, on the personal level, it's really, really important to me. And professionally, I'm in the field of social work. And I used to work at a middle school as a social worker for 6 years. And then I came over to Texas Southern University to teach in social work. And within our own core values, diversity is something that, you know, we value and we continually strive for, especially in terms of cultural competency. It's something that we always, you know, strive for, and we never actually get there 100% because the world is always changing. And so anything that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm all behind.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Frazier, and I am a board member at the James Allen PTA in Lexington, Kentucky. And diversity is really important to us because it's just a way for, we want everyone to have a seat at the table. We would love to get all the stakeholders together so that we can learn about issues, we can address issues. Really, we would just like to have a more diverse group represented by our PTA, just so that we can get different perspectives. We know as an organization that we are missing so much. So we really would like the additional voices to help round us out and better reflect our community. We would love to just have people that have different lives, who've lived different experiences from us, because we know that there's problems that exist that we probably don't even know about, and that if we had more diversity in our own PTA, that this would be a way to generate ideas, to come up with solutions. And we're very excited. We're very hopeful moving forward that we're heading in the right direction.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. And Faye, you want to share?
Hi, hope you can hear me. Hi, my name is Faye Serafika, and yeah, I'm in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And I joined the PTA last year during mid-pandemic because I wanted to learn more about what our parents have been doing, especially during this difficult time. And right in the first meeting, they had spoken about the DEI committee, and I jumped in to join. And it was really just forming right then and there. And the DEI committee came about because we realized we weren't, the PTA wasn't engaging, the school actually wasn't engaging with enough of the community, and we're a largely Hispanic community in our area. So yeah, the DEI committee was really there to help just engage that community more.
Perfect. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, so this next question is for Rebecca and Nicole. How did the diversity profile inform your work? Rebecca, did you want to kick us off?
Let me unmute myself. The diversity profile asks us to just look at the ways that our families identify There's a lot of groups that we could focus on, and hopefully once we fully diversify our PTA in this way, maybe we can circle back around and focus on other groups in the future. We chose to focus on the Hispanic community because our school is majority Hispanic. It's hard to know the exact numbers, but the school reports that it's between 60 and 70%. If you look at other things like the census, that's not exactly reflected, but that's what the school reports it as. And at this moment, our PTA is exclusively white. So we decided to focus on the Hispanic community. I mean, we know we have a problem and that we needed to be more intentional about building relationships with the Hispanic community. And we were very lucky to receive this grant and to sort of help us kick off those efforts to really introducing ourselves to the community and hopefully building relationships with the community.
And for me and for the other PTA officers, this instrument really helped us get outside of our clique. We can kind of, be very cliquey when it comes to parents and our kids and our play groups. And so it helped us really learn what we didn't know about our community. And a couple of things that we discovered in our research on our community and in discussion with some of the administrators on campus is that, even though we're kind of surrounded by these wealthier subdivisions and, $300,000, $400,000 homes, a lot of the families doubled and tripled up in order to pay for the house. And then we also learned that, there are a lot of, or we realized there are a lot of families living in apartment complexes that don't always get recognized, get overlooked a lot of times, because again, the focus is on the homeowners. And so that really helped us to learn a little bit more intimately about our community. And then, we also realized that there were a huge percentage of our parents, even though their kids spoke English, the parents did not. And so, oftentimes in our board meetings and in our PTA meetings, many of these parents, didn't come. And so we decided that based on our demographics and the attendance at our meetings, that we were going to focus on those who spoke Spanish at home.
Perfect. Thank you both. And part of the grant was really trying to engage these families and do listening sessions with them. Can you share a little bit about what your tactics were to engage families to do the listening sessions? What worked for you? And then what did you learn throughout that process? I'm going to ask Faye and Rebecca this. So Faye, do you want to kick us off?
So we were really lucky that there was a really great group that we worked with. We were able to find a lot of key communicators in our community. And one of them was the Asociación de Familias Hispana de los Tarrytowns, and AFHT for short. And they worked on literacy with a lot of the younger school groups. And really it was pre-K and kindergarten. And so when we did the listening sessions, there ended up being a lot of pre-K and kindergarten parents, parents of pre-K and kindergartners. And so it was really great to connect with them at that point, because a lot of them actually didn't even know what the PTA was or that it existed. And so it was really the help of like key communicators. And also we were lucky enough to have a lot of Spanish speaking and bilingual parents in our DEI committee who were able to do one-on-one outreach to reach a lot of the Hispanic community. And but just so you know, like our PTA too is many of almost all the parents are women, white women. Most of the parents are white women. And it's interesting because the DEI committee was a little break off from that. And a lot of the people in the DEI committee actually don't attend the regular PTA meetings, which was interesting. So but we are gathering more members, which is really great.
Perfect. Thanks, Faye. Rebecca?
When we began this grant, we were at the very beginning of the DEI journey. Like anyone that's undertaking this, I promise you that you could not be farther behind than we were. Like we were at the very, very step one of this, and we needed help. We decided to focus on Hispanic families, and we first turned to our family resource officer. I'm sure someone has someone similar in all your schools. And she sort of gave us a list of some people that she had suggested, but she had also connected us with an interpreter that the school was using. And the interpreter, I wish she was on this call because she was really the one that was crucial to our success. She really deserves all the accolades in this. She just had a lot of insight that we didn't have about how to communicate with the Hispanic community. She suggested actually reaching out to the families one-on-one, introducing them to the grant and what we were trying to achieve through the grant. And while during the introductions, actually scheduling them for the interviews. And that one-on-one approach worked amazingly well. Like we actually, I think, ended up going over the amount of interviews that were required because we had so many people interested in the interviews. And we also used we didn't put all of our eggs in one basket. We did use other tools. We have a Class Dojo app, which is like a school-based app. I'm sure a lot of places have something similar that they use. We also have a Facebook page, like for the PTA, and we posted things on the Facebook page. But really, none of those were very impactful as the individualized outreach that our interpreter assisted us with.
Thanks for sharing. You are all super resourceful, and we're really making those important connections to be successful in this grant, which I know is one of the greatest takeaways that I've had with working with all of you. This is for all of you, can you share with us about the listening sessions you hosted? How did you use the Facilitators Guide, and what did you learn from the conversations? What were some of those main takeaways? I will start off with Nicole on this one.
Mm-hmm. Well, for us, one of the major stakeholders in the DEI grant was obviously the principal. And so we discussed whether or not, she should be present at these focus groups, and ultimately decided on not being present because, she's a person of power over the parents, and that may impact the way they respond and the content of, their sharing. And so I think that helped our parents feel really comfortable. And we also started out every session discussing confidentiality. And that was good because it let the parents know that, hey, we're not going to out you. If you have a complaint about this or that, we're not going to, give your name to the principal or this teacher. And so I think that was very helpful to make the parents feel comfortable, knowing that their names would not be shared, their individual identity wouldn't be shared. And during the course of the conversation, we were really more facilitators. And when parents would, maybe give a one-word answer, then we would do some probing. We do a lot of reflection for the active listening and those kinds of skills. And I think that really helped the parents to share and expand on their thoughts and be really comfortable. And so I think, the parents really enjoyed that time to just talk and share.
Wonderful. Faye, do you want to share a little bit about your listening sessions?
Yeah, so we held our listening sessions entirely in Spanish, which was really wonderful because we do the complete opposite in most other meetings here. And the resources that we received from the National PTA actually really helped keep the meetings on track, because we did run into the issue too that a lot of the parents were worried about being outed by the teachers. They're worried that their children would have repercussions if they spoke out and spoke up. But confidentiality really did help, and parents became really comfortable to be able to speak and talk about some of the issues. But without going into too much details about, too much about the school and issues in the school, and really just kind of relating it to communication and, also just, how best we can all engage with each other.
Perfect. Thanks, Faye. Rebecca?
Well, during our listening sessions, we learned a lot of new information, and then some of the information just sort of reinforced what we already knew. None of the families knew what the PTA was. I don't think there was any exceptions. None of them knew what they were. There wasn't an equivalent in any of the countries that they had come from. So it was the listening sessions were a good starting point for us to have the conversation of what the PTA is. And I'd like to also point out that when I say the word listening session, we did all these on Zoom. I'm in Kentucky. We were out of school for a year. So all these are over Zoom. And if they didn't have a computer, they could call in on the Zoom. So all these were done. None of us were ever in the same room together, just to clarify that. We learned a lot about how we needed to rethink how that we communicate with our families. They really love the one-on-one outreach. They love texting. We'd never utilized either of those methods before. We learned that all of them use some sort of translation tools. So that was actually good that we learned that. But something that we never thought about was that they could not translate if the text was embedded in an image. Like if you couldn't cut and paste it. So we are trying to make sure that if we do have a really nice creative image that we all love, that we make sure that we provide the plain copy at the bottom if it's not all translated. In theory, we want it to all be translated, of course, but if not, at least be able to have it accessible where they can copy and paste it into a translation services. And another thing that a lot of people, so once they knew what the PTA was, a lot of them were really happy and would love to participate. And several of them mentioned that they would love to be able to participate from home. We don't know exactly how we're going to make that come to fruition or what we're going to be able to do, but if they could pick up something and take it home and complete it and bring it back, a lot of them would really love to do that. So it's going to take a little creative thinking on our part to figure out how we're going to utilize that aspect of these people that want to volunteer. But it was great. We learned a lot of things that we would have never known otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I know you hit a little bit on this, Rebecca, but I want to ask you all a little bit about your action plan. Could you tell us how did you, use what you learned to really inform your next steps? Could you tell us what those are? I'll start off with Faye. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi. Sorry. So yeah, we have a lot going on right now, and one of the smaller and easier things, or at least we hope that we could change or work on, was preferred communication. So we realized that a lot of the Hispanic community in our area used WhatsApp, for instance, instead of, and we have another app that we use in school called Remind. But honestly, with Remind, even a lot of the non-Spanish speaking parents didn't even know how to use it that well, but everyone seems to know how to use WhatsApp really well. So we're definitely going to be sharing, hopefully, more communications coming the fall using WhatsApp. And one of the bigger things that we have in the works too, that we realized, because when we have back to school nights, or when we had back to school nights, there would always be a table, for the PTA for recruitment. And this was really one of the only ways that we kind of like captured a lot of parents, other than giving them like a huge packet during the summer saying, here, sign up for the PTA and learn more about the PTA. And just to engage more with the community, we decided that maybe there's a way we can do a separate event that would be, all in Spanish, that, not in just in, that would be organized by the PTA to show parents like what the organization does and what we can do, and where also the the money is going when we ask for dues. It can go to events like this. And yeah, so in September, we're hoping to plan a big, I'm imagining like a block party. I hope it turns out this way, where we have all the different schools, because our makeup of our PTA consists of pre-K all the way to high school. So it's a pretty big group. And we're hoping to have like all the schools and also all the extracurricular activities come and join, maybe have booths or tables, and really kind of just have it all in Spanish. And, you know, instead of what would have been done during a back to school night, would be having a presentation in English with Spanish translation, in which you'd have to wear headphones. And it just felt so out of touch when we knew that so much of our community was Spanish speaking. So yeah, so we're working on it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that turns out, and for you to give us an update. Nicole, how about you? Could you share a little bit about your action plan?
Yeah, and we learned so much in these focus groups. And one of the interesting things that we learned was that with our parents, they really did have a good understanding of what the PTA does, but they expressed that they just didn't feel like we made a big difference. And so, you know, even though that kind of hurt our feelings on the inside, we were so appreciative of them to share that, because that told us that we need to be better at announcing and you know, getting the word out there about the things that we're doing with the money that we raise, and you know, the things that we accomplish, and that alone may attract more parents to, you know, want to join and say, oh, I see what they're doing, right? I see what difference it's making. And so that was the first thing that we learned. The other thing that we learned was really related to something that a famous social worker, Brene Brown, I don't know if y'all follow her work, but it's something Brene Brown often talks about, which is, you know, as human beings, we're built for social connection. And if there's one thing that the pandemic did, is it really interrupted what we were made for, right? And that came through in these focus groups where although parents were very satisfied with the communication from the teachers and the academic part of the online learning, they were really dissatisfied with the social component. So the kids that were in online learning, although they were getting the math and the science and the reading, they weren't getting that socialization that's so crucial to that stage of development, right? And so what they really wanted was some type of online social activity that outside of the academics that their kids could participate in. So that gave us ideas of what we could put into our action plan to help facilitate that. And it was also interesting that the parents wanted to connect with each other in some type of setting like the focus groups were. They expressed that they felt such a relief after talking with each other during the focus group, and they want more of that, but they want that with different grade levels. So normally we sort of group together in those natural, you know, your play date friends, you know, they're in the same grade level, but our parents wanted separate, they wanted mixed grade level groups because they wanted to learn from those parents who had been in the school, who were more seasoned, who had experience, and they could go to for advice, like, oh, my kid's going through this, or, you know, I'm having this issue with the teacher. What do you suggest? Or, you know, who do you know I could go to? And so we found that interesting. And then the last thing that we learned was there was a yearning for you know, that sense of community again, because that had been taken away so much, so profoundly during the pandemic when, you know, we moved to a lot of online learning. So we learned that they want to have big family events where they can gather safely with social distancing. So that gave us the idea of having like a drive-in movie at the school where we can still socially distance, be in our cars, and still feel that sense of community, and, you know, until we can get back to, you know, our new normal, I guess, you know, hopefully soon here. But very interesting. We learned a lot.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to ask you all one more questions before we open it up to the folks in the chat. But what advice do you all have for PTA leaders that are looking to use these tools to either start their DEI journey or just work on, you know, getting to that next step within their DEI journey? And then I'll kick it off. I'll have Rebecca kick it off.
One thing that I would definitely suggest is making partnerships with people who already have connections to whatever community that you're focusing on. For us, our family resource officer is bilingual, and she's been a great help. The interpreter through the school already has these connections with a lot of these families and help them in various ways. So she has a lot of connections with the community, and really just take it a step at a time. I think sometimes it's very frustrating when you have a goal and it seems so hard to reach. So even if you only have one or two people that sign up to do these listening sessions, at the end of it, be like, hey, do you have, is there anyone in your son or daughter's class that would be willing to talk to us? Or do you have a neighbor that would like to talk to the PTA? Just really try to use their connections to see if you could find additional participants for your listening sessions. And just the families we talked to, this one lady almost moved me to tears. Like, she was so thankful that she had the opportunity to speak to us face to face over Zoom again, but face to face over Zoom, and just talk to us about the school and any concerns that she had, and to learn about the PTA. And she just really appreciated that we took the time to speak with her individually, and that she had our whole attention. And it was really moving. So they really, a lot of our families really truly appreciated it and really liked to participate once it got going, once they learned what the PTA was.
Thanks, Rebecca. Nicole, how about you?
I would advise, if you're thinking about doing this, get a group of parents together, or other stakeholders like Rebecca was saying, that, know that target community, that are familiar with them, and maybe have some inroads. Get a group of parents that can think outside of the box. And it's okay to lean into the discomfort, as we say in social work. So if your targeted community is, GLBTQ, and maybe you're not familiar with that population, or you have some biases of your own, get outside of your comfort zone and be okay with interacting with groups that maybe you normally don't interact with day to day, right? I know we talk a lot about diversity in terms of, native language or ethnicity, but diversity spans age group and gender and sexual orientation and all of these things. And a lot of times, we're uncomfortable with things that we're not used to. And I would also advise to find a group of parents who can lead these focus groups, who are really, really good listeners, and who can help people feel so comfortable that they, that the information and the sharing just flows freely, and it just allows people to really share and talk freely. And then also think about the type of incentives that you want to use to incentivize parents to participate in these focus groups. Think about your population and what they may need and what they may want, make sure that, it's something that they really value, and not just something that we think is important, right? And, I think those things will really help you be successful in running these focus groups.
Thanks, Nicole. And Faye, any final advice for our PTA leaders?
Well, our best way of connecting with the community was really it was a lot of one-on-one outreach, but really it's just finding those partnerships and groups, and just the people who really connected the most. And we were really lucky to have someone, and maybe not every community might have those people, but yeah, sometimes it just takes the one-on-one, and it's a lot of work, but it'll be worth it.
Definitely. Thank you all so much. I am going to pass it on over to Rebecca, because I know she's been closely monitoring the chat, to pull out some questions for our panelists.
We have a lot of great questions. I know I said I might share more resources at the end, but I'm going to just pop in the chat a link to our homepage, and I'm going to yield my time to our fabulous leaders so that we can get through some of these. We won't be able to get through all of them, but I'm going to do my best to pick out some that a lot of you have been asking. So one question that we got from a couple of different people was they wanted to know more about what issues were identified in the listening sessions, and were they more related to PTA stuff, or were they more related to school and teachers? So I'm curious if any of you want to sort of talk about that balance, and if you heard a lot more about the school, or if you did really get that direct feedback on the PTA specifically.
I can share, at least for our parents, their concerns were really about the school. Some of the major things that they were really interested in discussing were related to teacher-child interaction. Bullying was a big thing that came up. And, and at some point, we just had conversation. There was one concern about, something a teacher said to a student who was being bullied, and, it was the old, well, he calls you names because he likes you, or he hits you because he likes you. And I thought, oh, as a social worker, like, oh no, this is not good. We need to talk about this. And so, some of what the parents' feedback gave us were ideas for, the school administration to discuss maybe at a staff meeting, and talk about some of those things. And so, definitely the parents were concerned, at least in our case, with, things that go on at the school as opposed to just the PTA.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in? Yep, go ahead, Faye.
For us, a lot of school issues were brought up, but when it came to, for the parents who did know about the PTA, a lot of it was about, but there's a $10 donation that we have to make. Where does this money go? Like, what do you, why do you need so much money? This is not, can we be part of the PTA without paying this donation? So yeah, there were just a lot of skepticism about, like, what does the PTA really do? Because we feel like we don't see it, even though the PTA does do a lot. It just it's not clearly communicated exactly as to what they do. They thought, like, the parents that didn't know thought it was all just like fundraising, and they wasn't sure where the money went at all. But yeah, that was some of the issues on our end.
And then another question that I'll just kind of lump together is we got a couple different questions, both about pushback or resistance to DEI work, as well as just sort of a lack of urgency. Like, maybe they understand that, it's an important issue, but like, oh, we're doing a good enough job, we'll look into it later. So I'm curious, from any of your experiences or from what you've seen, what advice do you have for really stressing both to the school and to other members of the PTA that this is something we need to take seriously and is a journey worth pursuing?
I will just briefly mention that I was in the unique position where the PTA, before sort of the current leadership came on, was almost non-existent in our school. So we were in the unique position of sort of starting from new anyway. And sort of the new class of the PTA were all pretty, we knew that we had some serious diversity issues, and we were pretty open to pursuing it. But we had no sort of old guard to contend with. So it really was like starting from new. So we didn't have any issues in that regard. But but we were in the unique situation of seriously like starting from scratch. So I think in that regard, it really helped us.
Anyone else on this one?
It's tough. I feel like I'm one of the only non-white members of the PTA, and I gotta say, it felt really uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable going to the meetings, not just because I felt like everybody already knew each other too. A lot of the parents that were already in this knew each other for a while. Their kids had been in the schools for a while. So as a parent of like a young first grader just coming in, it just felt like I didn't know how to speak or like how to kind of break in and bring on these discussions. And so it was really through the DEI committee, it really helped to have those conversations outside of the PTA. I mean, we were still all PTA in the DEI committee, but it just made it easier to talk about these issues. And then we would bring it back during the bigger meetings. Like there'd be a time when we would be able to say like, okay, this is what we've been working on, and guys, like we need help here. So sometimes it just takes, you know, building that little group and just, yeah, breaking outside of the bigger one. But yeah, that's how I think could help.
I'm going to jump in real quick because there was a follow-up question that Faye, I think you might be able to help with too. Somebody was asking if this needs to start within the board, or if you could sort of like get a group of parents excited about this work. Can you talk a little bit more about how the DEI committee formed? Are they all board members? How did that sort of come to be?
Oh, it was so, okay, it was very confusing, and I still get confused because we have a very huge board because of the fact that we cover such large, like from PTA to high school. And the board not only, so the board committee, which is like the main four, it's like the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. Okay, those are the four big, but then the rest of the board consists of like VPs from every grade. So it's very large, and on top of that, committee leads and such. So basically it just felt like, I was like, so where are the other parents who are not part of this board? Are they able to come in on these meetings? And they are, but only twice a year. And I'm still like, that needs to change. But they're like, yeah, but parents are invited to come to every meeting. But I'm like, yeah, but you're not making it very inviting.
Got it.
I kind of hopped on. So the DEI committee in our district started in September, and I hopped on in October. And that was basically, so they were like 1 month in, and they were asking for members, and I was like, I'll join. Who else is in this?
Mm-hmm.
And then it slowly, it built from there, but it built from like a really small group, then asking other parents who weren't necessarily part of the PTA to come in and join because they showed interest in it. So it was a tough break, and it just still feels like that sometimes. And when the fact that I made it to secretary in the board, I'm still like, I'm kind of like, how did that happen again? But I'm glad to be there now, so I hope I can initiate some more like, let's do this and get more parents on board, please. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Thank you. Well, we're just about at time, but I do want to see, Nicole, is there anything you wanted to chime in on this one?
Well, you know, our board is all Black and Hispanic, which represents, you know, a lot of the school, and two of us speak Spanish on the board. So we're pretty representative of the people that we represent. We got lucky.
Wish we had longer. I feel like we could have gone on and on. But I do want to just say a big thank you to our PTA leaders, not only for presenting tonight and sharing with all of you, but for all of the hard work they've done over the last year. It's really been wonderful to work with all of you. I also want to thank all of you who are watching tonight. And I really do encourage you to check out our resources. Someone asked us if we have resources in Spanish, and we do have loads of them. So I'm putting again, pta.org/family engagement. You can guide yourself through the resources since we didn't have time this evening. You also can email us at familyengagement@pta.org. I'm putting that in the chat as well. If you didn't get your question answered, please reach out to us. Griso and I are really happy. We check the emails ourselves, and we're happy to get answers to you. And if there are questions specifically for Nicole, Rebecca, or Faye, we know how to reach them too.